shame busting coach Jen Bovey from www.jenbovey.com. And I want to talk to you guys today about how to build a foundation on self-love and self-care. I really feel like we've lost that drive to really deeply love ourselves as well as to take really good care of ourselves. So why does that happen, first of all? I think that happens because we get overcommitted, we get really busy, we get overstimulated, and frankly, most of us weren't taught or role modeled that really good self-caring person, right? My dad was a workaholic, my mom was an overgiver and an overcommitter. So neither one of them role modeled for me what self-care really looked like, let alone self-love. But as I look at this as an adult and as a parent and as a wife and as a friend, as a daughter, a sister, an employer, an employee, all these things, I really think that the key to so much happiness and peace in our lives comes from self-care and self-love. So let's look at what self-care isn't. Okay, we're done. I think anything and everything can be self-care. And this will create so much ruckus for people because people want to say that self-care is only particular things. I'm a firm believer that it's all based on your motives and your intentions, right? So if I decide that my body really needs an Epsom salt bath, that's self-care. If I decide that I need an iced tea from Starbucks, that can be self-care. If I decide that I want to read a book because I need some downtime and I also want to stimulate my brain and I also want to gain this new skill, that can be self-care. Can shopping be self-care? Absolutely. If it's been 7 years since I bought any panties, that is self-care. You know, so let's not get caught up in the right and wrong of it. I feel like that's a disservice we've done to ourselves. We need to categorize self-care into this little tiny box, and that doesn't help us. That doesn't promote us being caring. It doesn't promote us being loving. It doesn't promote us being nurturing and fulfilling our own needs. And I think that's what we're really being called to do with the self-care movement. I believe that once we start doing more and more self-care for ourselves, we change our priority list, right? So if you had asked me 8-10 years ago on a priority worksheet inventory where I was as a priority in my own life, I would have fallen at the bottom. And I say that now with no shame because that's just how I was raised, and that's what society reinforced, and that's what a good woman does, and that's what a good mom does, right? But what I know now is that by being the number one priority in my own life, that helps me to be able to show up in my relationships more authentically. It helps me to show up in my kids' lives more naturally. Helps me to be more present. It helps me to be more giving, more loving, all of these great attributes that I have that I'm capable of, but I'm not necessarily always able to have access to, right? I'm sure you can relate. So, self-care can be anything that I need it to be. The other thing that I really want to urge you guys to move away from is, I'm trying to remember, it was probably 10-15 years ago now, I was really big on the self-care day. I'm going to take a day a week just for me. And that's kind of how other adult women had taught me it was supposed to be done. You take one weeknight a week, and you don't do any chores, you don't pay any bills, you don't really engage with other people, you just decompress and you take downtime. And that worked until it stopped working anymore. And the reason it stopped working is because I just didn't have the time to take a whole night to myself. You know, I have kids now, I have a husband, I have pets, I have demanding jobs. That doesn't leave a whole night to myself. So then I had this brilliant idea, which is really common in my experience with lots of people around the world, that I would just take a day, okay? One Saturday a month will be my self-care day. That'll be great. Except for, let me tell you what happens when you relegate a day to self-care. You don't have the money to engage in self-care. You don't have the time. Other commitments come up. You don't have the energy. You're too burned out. I can go on and on all day about what gets in the way. So I'm no longer a fan of self-care days. And instead, what I really, really want to empower you to be able to do is to implement self-care activities as you go along. So I'm a firm believer in doing self-care all throughout the day, every day, so that I can build a foundation of self-care. And that may seem overindulgent to you at this point in time, but it's nothing extravagant. Like, it's not going and getting massages 3 times a day, 5 days a week, right? It's little things like, okay, well, it's been 2 hours and I haven't peed yet, so I'm gonna go pee. And while I'm peeing, I'm gonna do some grounding. And I'm just gonna check in with my body and notice where I'm holding stress and check in with my body and see how it's doing. You know, sometimes self-care can be as simple as shutting out all the distractions for 45 seconds and just feeling yourself breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. It can literally be that simple. And that's okay. That's a solid foundation for self-care and self-love. Because my experience is once we get the self-care down pat, then it makes it easier and easier to engage in self-love, right? So, what can self-care look like throughout the day for busy working people who have kids, who have obligations, who have responsibilities, whatever? It can really look like whatever you need it to look like. But more relevantly for me, what it typically looks like is it looks like, these will seem like simple no-brainers for some of you, and for some of us it'll be really overwhelming. But for me personally, it starts out with doing my protein shake in the morning. It starts out with eating lunch and eating dinner. And it continues with feeding my body the water that it desires, you know. It also includes taking a time out throughout the day to do some meditation or self-hypnosis. It also includes doing some EFT tapping, especially if my energy is running low and I need to amp it up a little bit. What I've noticed is sometimes when I have a break in between clients and I run to the bathroom really quick for that 2-minute potty break, it doesn't take 2 minutes. I can do some tapping while I'm sitting there. I'm just sitting there peeing anyway. I might as well make good use of my time, right? So whatever you want and need self-care to be, that's okay. The biggest portion of this is I just want you to give yourself permission to take really good care of yourself. I want you to give yourself permission to check in with yourself and to see what you do need and what you don't need. And I want you to give yourself permission to check in with yourself to see what's working and what's not working. You know, here's a classic example of something that didn't work previously in my life. Previously, I did laundry once a week. You know, it was typically on Sunday nights. I wasn't doing a whole lot else. I don't work all day on Sundays. I only work a half a day to 3/4 of a day, so I'll come home and do laundry. Now that no longer works in my lifestyle. So now what I tend to do is I tend to monitor my laundry basket. And as I see the dirty clothes growing, as it's growing towards the top, I typically will take it out and throw a load on then. It makes it more manageable for me, right? It's no different than the mentality of cleaning your house. Do you take a whole day to clean the entire house top to bottom? Or do you take Tuesday morning to clean up the bathroom really quick? And do you take Wednesday evening to clean up the kitchen really quick? That makes it more manageable, right? I don't ever want this to be overwhelming for you. And here's the piece that most people don't talk about because I don't think they have the information. Shame absolutely blocks you from taking good care of yourself. It doesn't set out to do that, and it doesn't do it intentionally, but it's a side effect of shame. One of the realizations that I've had over the last 20 years of working with people is when they have a high level of shame inside of them, they typically don't know how to engage in self-care. I remember this one time I was leading this shame resiliency group, and I started talking about self-care and how great it is to take good care of yourself, and then I checked in and I looked around the room, and there were 5 to 8 women in this room. They were all the same. They all had checked out, they all had glassy eyes, they all were overstimulated, and I was like, hold on. What is happening here? And they all just told me, I don't even know what self-care looks like. And I think that we have two ends of that spectrum running around in society now. We have the people who don't know what self-care looks like and don't know how to engage in good self-care. And we have the people that don't feel like they're worthy of self-care, so they don't do any self-care. They just consistently take care of everybody else. I'd love to bring you all back to the middle. And at the middle, the way I see it is really taking good care of yourself. So one of the things that I really work with my clients to do is we talk a lot about how shame deteriorates and kind of picks away at that core loving self, that core self that believes you're worthy of connection and believes you're worthy of connecting with yourself to take really good care of yourself. I think that's part of the problem here. When we have a core base program running of shame, it typically doesn't allow us to engage in a way that is really good self-care, that is really good self-love, because we don't feel worthy, we don't feel smart enough, we don't feel good enough, we don't feel thin enough, we don't feel pretty enough, we don't feel wealthy enough, we don't feel whatever enough. You can put whatever you need in that blank, and that's what blocks us from taking really good care of ourselves. So one of the things we look at when we're looking at how does self-care work is we're looking at ways to implement really small, tiny steps of self-care that don't trigger that whole shame spiral, that don't make you feel really indulgent, that don't make you feel really lazy, that don't, whatever that verbiage is in your head. Like for me, for years, the spiral thoughts went from I'm lazy, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm damaged and defective, right? Many people have that spirally thoughts that they carry around with them. So what I want you to do is I want you to find really small and simple ways to engage in self-care that doesn't stimulate any of that, that doesn't activate any of that, because then what happens is you've built a foundation of self-care that's so solid, that's so spectacular, that spirally negative thoughts can't penetrate it, because you built it up in spite of having those thoughts. And then at that point, that allows us to really develop some shame resilience. When we're looking at shame resilience, I think it's important to recognize what shame is. And shame is that feeling or sensation of not being blank enough, fill in that blank with whatever you need it to be, and therefore unworthy of connection. And as human beings, I believe we all long for connection, right? We're all trying to connect with other people, with our animals, with ourselves. Dogs, for me, are an amazing source of connection. They're loyal, they're faithful, they're always excited to see you no matter when you come in the door. I wonder how it would be for you to start applying that level of love and devotion towards yourself. I think that's where we start to spin into the self-love stuff. So as far as self-love goes, I would really encourage you to build a foundation of a daily self-love lifestyle. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. I'm not talking about going out and buying yourselves diamonds. Although, if you can afford diamonds and if you want diamonds, then go out and buy them. But for me in my life, that's just not, I'm not big on that whole expensive jewelry thing. It doesn't make sense in my brain logically, right? So what does that look like in my life and in my clients' lives? It looks like choosing myself first. It looks like them choosing themselves first. So prior to working on this self-love lifestyle, I didn't really choose myself very often. So what that means is I was typically rejecting myself. I was typically setting myself aside. I wasn't necessarily a priority. And one of the things that I really, really like about developing a self-love lifestyle is it's really simple, not easy, but simple, and it's really fulfilling. So if something doesn't feel good in my life, I don't typically engage in that much longer. Let me find an example. So I do not enjoy taking the dog to the vet by myself, because it's really overwhelming for me, because I love her so much, because on and on. So what I do is I use that as an opportunity for my husband and I to connect about the appointment, and we go together. That's an act of me choosing me, because I chose what worked best for me. The reason why it doesn't always feel good for me to take the dog alone is because we had a dog previously who got really sick really quickly, and I thought it was a random appointment. So I took the dog by myself and I had to make a bunch of tough decisions. So now I feel like I have some kind of trauma around that. So I tend to make sure that I'm choosing myself in every area of my life. What does that look like as far as my clients? I have this client who struggles to ask for his needs to be met in his relationship, right? Great guy, really intelligent, but he just can't ask his spouse to meet his needs. And so by choosing himself first, that's given him the opportunity to ask these people in his life to meet his needs. And as a result, he's able to show up for himself more authentically, more energetically, happily, and more grounded, because his needs are getting met. So when we're looking at what a self-love lifestyle is, I think it's important to look at what's blocking you from really investing in a self-love lifestyle, which is not going to necessarily be a fun conversation or a pleasant conversation. It can be amazing for you though. So for decades, probably, since I was a small child, I really didn't think I was worthy of loving myself because I was too stupid, I was too fat, I was too lazy, I was too damaged, I was too defective. And so when I'm constantly insulating myself, which is a mechanism of shame, I'm insulating myself from being able to connect with the outside world because all I'm looking at is my defects and how horrible I am and how awful I am and how this I am and how that I am. That doesn't allow me to love myself, and it doesn't allow me to choose myself. And so therefore it doesn't allow me to honor myself, and it also doesn't allow me to value myself. All of these things are tiny little steps in that self-love foundation. When we're looking at how to begin implementing self-love, I think it's important to recognize that it starts with, for lack of better descriptors, faking it until you make it. Literally the best, I think I came at this from a sideways manner, right? I really started focusing on self-care, and I really started taking really good care of myself. And as a result of taking really good care of myself, I stopped the negative barrage of garbage that I was spewing at myself every time I noticed myself in the mirror. I stopped the negative barrage of garbage every time I put on a piece of clothing. I stopped the negative barrage of garbage every time I caught my reflection somewhere. I stopped the negative barrage of garbage every time I was hungry or thirsty or lonely or excited or sad or whatever, any of these human emotions, right? And I remember the day very clearly. I was doing something on my phone and I was scrolling around doing stuff, and I accidentally opened the camera app and I saw my reflection. And for the first time ever, I didn't wince. I wasn't repulsed. I was just like, oh, hey, I know her. She's pretty cool. And then I was like, oh wait, that's me. Because I am cool. I'm amazing. I'm loving. And so are you. If I were sitting right here, right now in person with each and every one of you, I'm sure I could quickly come up with 10 to 15 things that you're good at, that you're natural at, that you're skilled at even. I'm sure it wouldn't take me more than 10 minutes to come up with a list of strengths about you, because I'm focused on you and I'm aware of what you're really skilled at and what you're natural at, right? We don't typically look at our strengths very much. One of the things that I really work with my clients to begin doing is to develop a gratitude program and a gratitude practice, because Dr. Daniel Amen in his brain spect imaging stuff talks about how focusing on just 3 gratitudes daily improved the quality of life in people in just 3 weeks. So here's a secret that I don't always talk about. In the early 90s, I was making gratitude lists, and I was so excited because I could come up with 50 to 75 things I was grateful for in less than 5 minutes. Isn't that spectacular? Totally missing the boat there though, right? But nobody had explained that to me. They're just like, go make a gratitude list, that'll make you feel better. It never did. Never ever did I feel any better. I was just always like, this sucks, still sucks even worse, because now I've done this gratitude thing and I don't feel better, so I must suck. I must be a horrible human being. Fine. No, the point isn't to count how many things you can be grateful for. The point isn't to make a list as deep and as long and as wide as you can and in as quick amount of time as you can. The point is to begin experiencing and feeling that level of gratitude. And I wonder when the last time you made a gratitude list about all your skills were. I wonder when's the last time you made a gratitude list about your ability to connect with yourself. I also wonder, when's the last time you made a gratitude list about your amazing body? I don't have a perfect body. I'm not a size 3 by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm here to tell you I have an amazingly powerful body. It has protected me through this life I've lived, and I'm still here, moving, breathing, living, thinking, talking, existing, interacting. So I have a lot to be grateful for as far as my body goes, even though it's not perfect. So if you're new to gratitude, the thing I would recommend in the beginning is just to write out this formula. I am grateful for blank because blank. So some examples from my life are, I'm grateful for sleep because it allows my body to heal. I'm grateful for love because it's helped me to show up. I'm grateful for, I'm trying to not do my simple ones that I do most days. Here's one I do every day. I'm grateful for water because it hydrates my body. I'm grateful for clients because they allow me to use my skills. I'm grateful for money because it allows me to support myself. I'm grateful for sunshine because it helps me to feel alive, right? It doesn't matter where you are at. You can start very, very simply, because that's how I started in the beginning years ago. I started very simply. I'm grateful for water because it hydrates my body. I'm grateful for food because it nourishes my body. I'm grateful for air because it helps my body to breathe. That's where I started, literally, and probably with that tone of voice and that facial expression too. But now when I do my gratitude list, now I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. I forgot about that. Oh yeah, what about this? And so it's become fun to me because I know that when I'm saying these things or writing these things, I typically write mine, I feel them in my body, and that helps them to come alive and it helps me to come alive. And that's a movement for me in loving myself, because when I'm loving myself, I'm able to focus on the things I'm grateful for. So I don't really care where you're at in the self-love movement. And there's totally a scale right here. Over here is those people who absolutely are at war with themselves. They absolutely hate themselves. They degrade themselves at every given opportunity. And way over here are the people that have arrived, the people that absolutely love themselves, the people that consistently choose themselves, the people that consistently support and affirm themselves. And I want to be like those people, right? So I want everybody to move with me more towards that other side. So start with gratitude. That's an amazingly powerful place to start. Start with choosing yourself. Start with hydrating your body. Start with taking some deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Start with standing outside in a safe place with sunlight and just feel that sunlight on your body and know that you're alive. It doesn't matter where you start. Pick a place and start there. I'm a firm believer that whatever we're doing, it's worth it if we're doing something, right? So when we're looking at how to develop a self-love lifestyle, it really is about how to find natural and safe ways to implement self-love into our daily life. And I am sure that sounds kind of simplistic to many of you right now, but that's okay. It is simplistic because it is simple. Again, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple. So ways that the people around me typically show that they're doing self-love things on a daily basis is they're showing up for their kids' activities. They're being present at their family dinners. They're being present for themselves. They're scanning their bodies and figuring out, where am I holding stress? How stressed am I? Can I commit to this thing that's come up, or do I need to take some downtime? Where are we at in that continuum? All of those are ways to engage in self-love. Each and every ways are perfectly acceptable. I'm not really concerned about what you're doing to develop a self-love lifestyle. I'm more focused on, are you doing anything? Because if we're doing anything, it's going to pay off. If we're not doing anything, then we're kind of standing still and moving backwards, right? So as a thank you for watching this today, I'm going to include free and low cost self-care activities. It's a PDF because I feel like those are the things that typically stand in many people's ways of engaging in self-care. The typical myths that I hear when we're looking at why aren't you doing much for self-care are, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the energy, it's too expensive, I don't have a whole day to dedicate to it. So I really want to bust all of those as quickly as we can. So I've given you a PDF full of free and low cost self-care things to do. None of them will be hugely time consuming. You could do a few of them a day, you could do one every day, whatever works for you. Find a philosophy, find a format, stick with it, and keep doing it. That's my recommendation, right? I'm also giving you a quick and easy PDF for beginning to implement a self-love lifestyle, because I think that that's very helpful, and the clients I've worked with have absolutely loved having both PDFs, but they've really, really loved the self-love lifestyle PDF as well, because it's allowed them to begin to show up for themselves. It's allowed them to begin to choose themselves. It's allowed them to begin to connect with themselves. And what they've also found is that by connecting with themselves, they've been able to connect with their spouses, they've been able to connect with their lovers, they've been able to connect with their children, they've been able to connect with their friends, they've been able to connect with their family, they've been able to connect with their employers and employees, they've been able to connect with their neighbors, and now these people who previously had no real connections in life have connections everywhere. And that's an amazing experience, and it's amazingly empowering, because now they know that they're worth it, they deserve it, and they're gonna do it, right? I also use EFT. So there's a lot of barriers to doing self-love, and there's a lot of barriers to taking really good care of yourself. For some people, it's just bottom line, it's subconscious mind programming. So I'm also going to include an EFT script that I used when I was doing a self-love movement, because it's designed to help lessen the intensity of the resistance you experience when you're engaging in self-love. So I hope that you'll find all of these things beneficial. I hope that they're all helpful. Pick a thing, commit to it, do it a few times a week. Start really, really simple. I'm not a fan of overwhelming ourselves and going full blown there, because I think what happens is it's no different than if we, here's a prime example, exercise. I remember in the past I would be like, I'm gonna exercise every day. And my friends would say, is that really realistic? And I'd be like, yes, it's very realistic, and I'm gonna do it every day. I'm just gonna do it for a little bit of time, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, but I'm gonna do it every day. And I did do it every day for 3 weeks. And then what happened was I got sick, I had to go into work early, I had an emergency, something happened, and I missed a day, just one day. And then that one day turned into 2 days. And then 2 days turned into 3 days. And then pretty soon we're at 5 days. And then we're at 7 days, and I've missed a whole week. And now I'm the world's biggest piece of garbage because I don't exercise every day, like I said I would. It was a simple goal. Why can't I just achieve it? So here's why I can't achieve it. It's not realistic. It's not achievable. There are very few things that I do in the world that I do every single day, which is less true than it used to be, but it's fine. I am a firm believer in setting ourselves up for success. So when I'm beginning to set up that self-care lifestyle, my goal is to do it every day, absolutely. But my target is to do it 3 times a week. And here's why 3 times a week. Because if my target is to do it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and it's Thursday, and I haven't done it, that means I have to step up. And that means Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'm gonna have to do it. So it helps me to set myself up for success. I'm a firm believer, choosing ourselves is a component of setting ourselves up for success, right? When I'm setting myself up for success, I'm never gonna fail. When I'm setting myself up for success to successfully engage in self-care, it's gonna happen without a shadow of a doubt. When I'm setting myself up for success as far as developing a self-love lifestyle, it's gonna happen every time. Because by setting myself up for success, it implies a few things, right? It implies that I'm worthy, it implies that I deserve it, it implies that I'm capable of it, it implies that I'm motivated to do it, and it implies that I'm committed to do it. And by implying all of those things, it's gonna happen more naturally and more gracefully. Does that make sense? So let me know if you have any questions. I really hope this was helpful for you. I'm a firm believer that so many changes in life happen when we begin to take really good care of ourselves. And as a component of taking really good care of ourselves, we also begin to love ourselves and engage in that world. So if you don't feel like you really highly love yourself and you don't feel like you really take good care of yourself, my simple recommendation for you is just to engage in some self-care. 3 days a week, write it down and say, I am going to take a few minutes and breathe 3 days a week. And what you'll find is those 3 days a week are your amazing days a week. And pretty soon those 3 days will turn into 4, and 4 turns into 5, 5 turns into 7. So then you have this solid foundation of taking really good care of yourself, and you notice that it feels good when you take good care of yourself. It feels more authentic when you take good care of yourself. You feel more valued when you take really good care of yourself. You're able to show up more when you take really good care of yourself. So all of these are ways for you to take really good care of yourself. Just pick one way. There are so many options out there, it's really not funny. So if you're a person who's really overly committed, my recommendation for you is to maybe just evaluate your boundaries, because boundaries are a huge form of self-care. Many, many years ago, this is awful, I didn't even know what boundaries were. People would always ask me, what are your boundaries? And I'm like, what? Is that really even a thing? What are you talking about? Then I started studying boundaries and I realized I lacked a lot of boundaries. And so one of my personal boundaries is, especially if I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I don't commit to things in the moment. I will typically respond with, I need to check my calendar. Let me get back in. I'll let you know. So I started doing this all the time because it was just my default at that time, because I was living a really stressed out lifestyle because I wasn't doing good self-care. And I remember this one time my sister was having a housewarming party or whatever, and she invited me, and I'm like, let me check my schedule, I'll get back to you. And she was like, you know what? She called me right back. She was like, I know that that's just code speak for I don't really want to do it. And I'm like, no, literally, I just need to check my calendar to make sure I didn't double book myself, and then I'll let you know. And she's like, sure. So I felt bad because I worried that I had communicated the wrong thing to her. But in reality, she was also someone who didn't have spectacular boundaries. So I think in me firming up my boundaries, that transmuted into her firming up her own boundaries. And so now she doesn't have to overcommit to everything. Now it's okay for her to say no to people. Now it's okay for her to choose herself first. All of these things have a spiral effect, right? They don't just ever affect us. They affect our children, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our employees, our coworkers, all of that. So I know that you are worth self-care. I know that you are worth taking really, really good care of yourself. And I know that you're worth loving yourself deeply, completely, and in a fulfilling manner. Those are my hopes for you. So check out the PDFs I've sent. Check out the tapping script that I'll also send. I hope this was really helpful for you. Let me know if I can do anything else to be of service. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.